Hey guys, what's up? Thanks for coming back. This is going to be part 2 in my prepping for Modern Warfare video. And this game we're going to be talking about playstyle and just the different variations of playstyle you can have. And it's more of like a philosophical video. There is some in-depth talk about kill-death ratios and how that affects the game and just that kind of stuff. So we'll go into that. But this first game, both these games are on Nuketown, and they are perfectly representative of what I want to talk about. So this first game is a kill confirm, where I'm playing way more for kills than for objectives or for wins. And when you're talking about playstyle, that's the first question you need to ask yourself. And ultimately, for most of you, that's probably the only question you'll need to ask yourself. Are you playing for kills or are you playing for wins? How do you have your fun when you play the game? And they kind of coexist, so there is some crossover in, like, when you do really well for kills, you're more likely to win. So that's a thing, but really the question you need to ask yourself when you're trying to decide how you want to play, and you know, here's my thing, right? I love learning, and I love looking at things in a different way or seeing them from a different perspective that I hadn't before. And so my hope is that with a platform like this, like YouTube, which has been great for me, I can hopefully impart some of the knowledge from Call of Duty that I've accumulated over the last 11 years and, you know, 11,000 hours worth of time playing this game and tracking stats and going so far in depth that you wouldn't even believe it. You'd probably laugh at me and call me a nerd. So I hope that I can impart some of that knowledge on you and maybe just make you ask a question or two about your playstyle or your game that you hadn't asked before, and hopefully make your experience better by teaching you something. You know, maybe you'll learn something from this and you can change something and maybe achieve something you've always wanted to achieve. So I hope that's my hope for this. So over my years of Call of Duty, again, over 10,000 hours, I have tracked stats and leaderboards and scores and wins and kills and accuracy of the gun, not only for probably hundreds of thousands of players, but also for game modes upon game modes upon game modes, domination versus team deathmatch versus kill confirm. So I've studied all these things among players. And you couple that with your friends list that you have when you add people for stat tracking, and the combination of Record by FUD, who I play with all the time, who also did that, who maxed out his friends list through the entirety of the eight or so years that we played Call of Duty basically every day, so that he could track stats also, and we compared numbers and stuff. So over that time, I came up with a stat that I thought was way more indicative of how someone was going to perform and how much work they could do in a game, and whether or not they were going to win that game. And I call that stat kills per day. And what that is a measure of how many kills someone gets for every 1 day of playtime that they have. And pretty early on, I realized that this had a lot of value because it really showed me how much work someone was going to do. And the reason for that is because when you break it down, it actually correlates directly with a kill-death ratio of the average player. And so just by looking at someone's kill death, you can basically guess about how many kills they're going to get in a game pretty accurately. And then same with the opposite. Like if you see how many kills per day they have, then you can pretty accurately guess what their kill death ratio is or what their playstyle is going to be. And so this was a invaluable tool for me for many, many years. And we'll kind of go into it. So games like Ground War, where it's 9v9, are a little bit of an outlier, and games like this game, Black Ops 4, where most games are 5-on-5, unless you play Deathmatch or Kill Confirmed, those games are a little bit of an outlier. Search and Destroy does not apply at all, and any game mode where there's a respawn delay also does not apply fully. It does sometimes, but not other times, so don't count on that. So really what we're talking about here are, like, you know, basically the big 3 game modes. Team Deathmatch, Domination, Kill Confirm. Now, these also apply to games like Safeguard and Demolition in the past and stuff like that. But basically, in order to do this, what I had to come up with was, and again, this is not just like a couple profiles, guys. This is like years and tens of thousands of profiles to develop this trend. And what it is it comes down to basically about an average. So I break it down on a scale of 10, where 1 is like camping so hard that you go like 6-0 in a full length game, and a 10 is like the guy who goes like 30-30, who just rushes so hard and so nonstop that he's never not in the action. And so in my opinion, most Call of Duty players are around the 6 to 7 range, and that constitutes a submachine gunner. So as you go through the ranks, you go like 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3 are basically like guys who play with LMGs and stuff like that, or like 3-burst rifles, or like DMRs or marksman rifles, stuff like that. Snipers, the guys who like truly snipe. And then, 4, 5, 6 are people that play with assault rifles. 4 being the guys that camp really hard, 6 being the guys that rush harder with assault rifles. And then you get to submachine guns, which are basically, really, submachine guns are like 5 to 9, basically. And really, 10 is reserved for, like, I guess you could have submachine guns at 10, but 10 is almost exclusively reserved for the guys who are trying to knife all game, or guys who are shotgunning and actually use that playstyle. Those are pretty much 10s. Everybody else fits in there somewhere. So, again, 6 to 7 is about the average Call of Duty player. Now, the average Call of Duty player, this is the average playstyle, so I'm not talking ratios here, but kill-death ratios would be like anything under 1.3, so like 1.29 and under, have a kills per day of less than 3,000. Meaning if you took all their playtime and all their kills and you divided it, it would be less than 3,000. That is at a level where you're not really having much of an impact on the game. Not enough to actually win. And so people with... Now, if you look at Team Deathmatch as the benchmark, what you look at is you start to realize that people who have higher kill-death ratios have higher win-loss ratios. Now, you could say, oh, that's because Team Deathmatch is a game of kills versus deaths, and that is true. But the higher your kill-death ratio, the higher your win-loss ratio is going to be. And the reason for that is because you're going to be alive more. Here's the best example, right? Let's take... Each game is a series of interactions, okay? So if you go 20 and 20 in a game, that means you had an interaction 40 times with another player, and you won 20 of them, and you lost 20 of them. So that's a 1.0 kill-death ratio. Now, if you just win 10 more interactions, that means you've now won 30 and you've lost 10, which is now a 3.0 kill-death ratio. So just the difference in 10 interactions could be the difference between 1.0 and 3.0.
They're gone.
All right, so it's extremely important. Now, what you learn is that a kill-death ratio is directly proportional to the win-loss ratio. The one exception is if you leave games. If you leave games frequently, then this does not apply, because you get a loss every time you leave, and that's not indicative of what you're actually playing at. So, for example, someone with a 2.0 kill-death ratio in a team deathmatch should roughly have around a 1.5 to a 1.75 kill-death, or win-loss ratio, excuse me. So your win-loss is generally about 0.5 to 0.25 lower than your kill-death ratio in the purest game mode, which is team deathmatch. So as you go to games like Domination, it changes a little bit, but it's roughly about the same. So what happens is, as you start to have better ratios, you start to impact the game more. So people who have a 1.3 or under kill death don't do enough work to actually impact the game enough. That's about 3,000 kills per day, and they're going to have win-loss ratios under 1. Maybe as high as 1, maybe 1.05, but they're barely going to be breaking even at best. And on average, they're probably around 0.8, 0.9, somewhere in there. Okay, so between 1.3 and, I think I bumped the desk, sorry, 1.3 and 1.75, which is the next benchmark, 1.8, somewhere in there, is 3,000 kills per day. So all those people up to there are going to be getting about 3,000 kills per day, and they're basically 1.5 is the bare minimum where you are having a high enough kill-death ratio that you're impacting the game in a way that allows your team to have a better chance of winning. So ultimately, you should be shooting for a kill-death ratio over 1.5, basically regardless of your playstyle, because if you don't, then you're just going to get steamrolled most games. And even if you don't care about winning, then if you have less than a 1.5 kill-death ratio, you're not putting your team in a good position to win, and you're basically giving the other team a lot of kills. So these are the 3,000 kills per day guys. So if you talk about up to someone with like a 1.75, they're at the higher end of that, and they might have a win-loss ratio 1.25 to 1.5, somewhere in there. So they're starting to win a lot more games. Above that, so 1.8, 1.75, 1.8, all the way up to 2.5 is 4,000 kills per day. And this is where you're really starting to have an impact on the game. This is where you really are starting to impose your will on the enemy team, and this is why your win-loss goes up at this point, and this is why your overall enjoyment of the game goes up. And this is why when you play against people who have a 2.0 kill-death ratio, you know you're playing against them. Because you're like, wow, this guy's good. So these guys are going to have a win-loss, 1.75 all the way up to, sometimes 2.25, which means that they're winning twice as many games as they're losing. And that's how much of an impact they're having on the game. They're so good, and they're getting so many kills and so few deaths, they're actually able to win twice as many games as they lose, and that's pretty significant. That means they're going to win 2 out of 3 games. That's pretty good. And then, above that is the top of the top, the creme de la creme. And just to give you a reference, the only people that fall into this category are like Optic Scump and like, Spiros and Optic TP, like guys who, Sean P1, guys who I watch a lot playing Blackout, and, guys who would be playing in the multiplayer if there wasn't a Blackout. But these are the only guys that can do that. Like, we're talking less than 1% of players fall into this category. It's a really, really, really exclusive club. And, I mean, just think about you guys. Think about if you've ever looked at anybody's stats. Think about how many times you've ever seen someone with, like, a 2.85 kill-death ratio. Like, it's extremely rare. And we're talking overall accounts here, by the way, and all these numbers, not just, like, one game. We're talking about overall numbers for the lifetime of someone's account. So, that is the average. So, what that means is if you're playing for kills, within that range, you can go all the way down to 1 and camp as hard as you possibly can, or you could go all the way to 10 and rush as hard as you possibly can. And what that does is that actually affects your kills per day a little bit. So, as you camp more, your kills per day go down, which means that it's very possible for somebody to have a 2.0 kill-death ratio, but only 3,000 or 3,500 kills per day if they're camping really, really hard. And in that case, you're going to end up with games like, 12-2 or 10-1. You're going to end up with these really low kill games. I think I'm putting the desk game, sorry. So I had a friend, Record by Fudd, who did that on Black Ops 1. He had a 4.0 kill-death ratio, which honestly is so hard to achieve that it's not even worth explaining it, because it wouldn't even register the sheer weight of what you would have to do to have a kill-death ratio like that. But what ended up happening was, over the course of the game, I was tracking his stats, obviously, because he's on my friends list and I play with him every single day. But over that period of time, what I started to realize is he was getting about 4,000 to 4,200 kills per day, which means that he was only doing the effective work. Even though he had a 4.0 kill-death ratio, he was only doing the same volume or effective amount of work as somebody with around a 2.0 kill-death ratio, maybe 2.25. So he was only doing as much work volume-wise as they were. So he wasn't, I mean, he had good high kill games, but he wasn't, like, absolutely smashing everybody with, like, 90 kills a game. That just wasn't happening. So when I realized how accurate the kills per day was, it was I was just laughed at myself, and I was like, man, all this time spending doing this, and it actually works. And that was looking at his win-loss ratio and realizing that he had about a 1.6 to 1.7 win-loss ratio, which fits in exactly right where I was talking about with 2.0 to 2.25 kill death. So what I realized was, regardless of what your ratio is, kill death wise, if you shoot for an average amount of kills, which in my case would be kills per day, however now they've started tracking games by like score per minute, which is actually a very similar type of rating. I realized that even though he had a 4.0, he was actually only winning as many games as if he had a 2.0, and that's because his kills per day were matching with a 2.0. So ultimately what we learned from this is that it's really the volume of kills that you get that impacts the game. So it's really about the amount of kills you get that get the game. But so, kill death ratio itself has nothing to do with anything. Like, I had a 2.65 kill death ratio on Black Ops 1, but I was only getting about 3,500 kills per day, which basically puts me in about the 1.6 to 1.75 range if I were to play like the average player, kind of running around trying to get into the action. So the amount you do has everything to do with the impact you have on the game, and therefore whether you win or whether you lose. So even if you're trying to go for wins, you still want to have some kind of good kill-death ratio. And so what I realized is that and so basically from this, and all this was ongoing while I was playing the game, because I used to do like the weekly leaderboards and you could check your stats weekly and stuff. So almost every week I would sort of adjust my playstyle a little bit and try different playstyles, and I end up with, you know, like Modern Warfare 3 was the biggest one. I'd end up with kill-death ratios sometimes 1.6, 1.7 for a whole week, to sometimes 2.5 for a whole week, or 2.6. So it's like we really just ran the gamut of like every combination possibly of what type of ratios you could have and what that meant for the game, and how much that would mean for your wins and your overall kills and all that kind of stuff. And so what I realized through doing that is there's actually a limit to how many kills you can get. For example, it's virtually impossible to have a 4,000 kills per day score while getting a 1.5 kill death ratio. It's almost impossible. You can't do it. And the reason is because that ratio is so low that, like we talked about earlier, you're losing those battles. So if you're going 20 and 20, then all you have to do is win 10 more, which means you lose 10 more, which means you go 30 and 10, which means you're alive now significantly more, and you can actually impact the game more. If you go, you know, if you're going 1.5 or less, it's really not possible to impact the game enough or get enough kills to get 4,000 kills a day. And that's sort of like the median good impact you want to have on the game. So ideally, you want to have a kill death ratio somewhere between 1.7-ish, 1.7 and like 2.25, somewhere in there. And you ultimately, ideally, you'd want to keep it in there. I had many, including Black Ops 1, where I wanted to go even higher. But ultimately, it doesn't benefit you as much if you're going above that or below that. So if you're kill death, and 1.5 is acceptable, but you know, you just know that you're trying to work your way up from that. And again, this all applies to you also if you chose to answer the question, I play more for wins. You know, because if you play more for wins, this all impacts you also, because you need to be doing a certain amount of work and able to win. And so what I realized was, over the course of time, just like 98 out of 100 people who had a 2.0 kill death ratio had 4,000 kills a day. 98% of people who had, you know, a 1.4 kill death ratio had 3,000 kills per day. Like, and it just started working. The more I looked at it, the more it made sense, and the more I confirmed it by just viewing more and more people's accounts and profiles. So this has a direct impact on your game. Now, with this new game, the player counts are going to change. There's going to be big team games like Ground War, stuff like that. So this won't, these specific numbers that I'm specifically talking about won't apply, but the same concept applies, because it's a concept based on Call of Duty. Now, the reason all these numbers work is based on the 6v6 game mode, because there's actually a ceiling, there's actually a maximum amount of interactions you can have in a game. For example, in a normal team deathmatch that's 6v6, you can't go 100 and 110. That exceeds the limit of the game entirely. And realistically, you can't even go 50 and 50 because there's more people on your team. It's not just you versus the other team. So there's actually a limit built into the function of the game of 6 versus 6 in a game that really limits. Actually, it's a hard limit on how many kills per day you can have. So with the new game, all that's going to be adjusted, but the numbers still apply and it's still relevant. So ideally, you really should be trying to get about twice as many kills as deaths for your lifetime of your account. And if you can do that, then the game is opened up to you. It's like a free game. And the reason I mean that is because, like, if you are running around with a submachine gun or even an assault rifle trying to get in the action a lot of the time and you're getting twice as many kills as deaths, it's a very free game for you. You can run a lot of places, you can do a lot of things, you can get a lot of kill streaks, you can get a lot of kills, you can do a lot of work, and it just becomes a more freeing experience. Whereas if you have like a 0.75 kill death ratio, it's a very rough game for you. You don't get as many kills, you die a lot, you don't get kill streaks, and it just feels less fun. And ultimately, that's what this game is about, right? It's about fun. And So for me, as I said in the last video with the sensitivity, if you haven't seen that one, check that one out. It just talks about how to set up your sensitivity for the type of style you want to have. I guess I probably should have done this one first before I did that one, but you know, based on what you want to do, I want to be a submachine gunner. I want to be like a 6 or 7, maybe even an 8 out of 10 rushing submachine gunner with like close to a 2.0 kill death ratio. And really, the fact of the matter is, as soon as you pick a playstyle and you just keep playing at it, you will improve. So if I start playing as a submachine gunner and I'm at a 1.5, that'll be a little bit disappointing, but I would understand that. And then over time, I can gradually get up close to 2.0, and then you really start having an impact on the game. And I have to tell you guys, if you haven't done that, it is a really satisfying experience. And the height of that for me was Modern Warfare 3. I was able to have a 1.93, and we were able to win. I had a 3.30 win-loss ratio on that game, and we basically won. So we were winning 3 out of 4 games, which is really awesome to say, and it just was such a fun experience. That's probably the most fun I've had on Call of Duty. 47 days, and that was the game that I feel like I was the best at. And I got that way from analyzing this type of stuff, looking at my style of play, my kill death ratio, how I was playing, the guns I was using, and sort of forming my own thing from that. So I hope you guys learned something from this. I hope you can take that from this and relay that into your own game modes, in your own gameplay, and hopefully be a better player and get more enjoyment out of the game from it. So I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you very much. See you in the next one.